So congratulations on the new album. It's out this Friday, right?
Yeah.
Yep. And I guess the first question I have for the two of you is, how did the two of you hook up? Because you have quite different backgrounds in music and things, so it's an interesting combination that you got working there.
I'll take this one. So Paul's from Minnesota, and he's I want to say he's about like 8 years younger than me. And my girlfriend, my current fiance actually, is from Minnesota, from the same town that Paul grew up in. And I used to go visit her farm, and Paul was kind of courting his now wife, who is my fiance's cousin.
Okay.
And so we used to hang out a little bit, and I actually saw Paul play in like a high school band when I was like in my in like maybe like 15 years ago or 10 years ago, and I was really impressed with his singing, and I thought it was a good show. And Paul's, he used to give me demos and stuff, and then eventually like we decided to like make some music together, and then we really just hit it off when we started working together, and so it kind of developed from there.
Right. And Paul, so were you aware of what Homer had done previously?
Oh yeah, I never got to see him play until maybe I was like 24, 25, but I knew his records.
Right.
Sophia and Sophia's mom Annie would make me mixes with lots of good music on it, and they'd often put a song that had one of the songs Homer was on.
Right.
Like I remember when Sophia went to see Homer play with like Amy Winehouse, and she came back and was like, "You got to check out this new singer," and Sharon too.
Yeah. So you come from more of a folk background. Homer, obviously, rhythm and blues. You call kind of what you're doing now kind of a new kind of folk. What is it?
We're calling it folk soul.
That's it. Yes.
Yeah. I kind of coined that term, and I think that it's not really like a new genre of music, but it just kind of falls into the type of music that I'm always drawn to.
Right.
So it's like I love classic soul music, and I love folk music and country music, and you hear the cross-pollination.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't think about that cross-pollination so much. And so like, I don't know, even you listen to like Dylan records, and there's like so much like soulful backbeats, like when he was playing with the band.
Yeah.
And so right there is some classic folk soul, in my opinion. And then you listen to like, Curtis Mayfield records, and even though they're straight classic soul records, they have like a lot of like that power to the people type lyricism that comes from folk music. And so it really, the traditions, like they move together.
Right. I guess if somebody were to say folk soul to me out of the blue before hearing you, I would have thought of Bill Withers.
Yeah, exactly. And he's one of my all-time favorites. So it's a perfect, the acoustic guitar.
Yeah.
Very soulful approach, but also just has a really folk element to the vibe.
Right. So now you've got a bunch of new songs on a new album, and I assume I don't have credits for who does what or whatever. So I assume the two of you write together, do you?
Mm-hmm.
And how does that work?
We're kind of still developing it, but our process now, it's very collaborative. A lot of the songs on this album were where we kind of like honed our process, I feel like. But we, listened to some tracks to get inspired and reference, and start putting chords together and start writing lyrics together. I mean, sometimes one of us bring in an idea, and the other person critiques and reforms.
Right.
And sometimes like Homer will bring in a completely finished song, or I'll bring in a completely finished song, but that's pretty rare. I feel like we work better collaborating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like the the process kind of started with Paul bringing in a lot of his music, because he's more of a, he's a vocalist and a lyricist, and so he'll
Right.
bring in songs. And I'll be like, that's cool, but maybe we can push it in this direction, that direction. And then like in doing that, like I started getting more comfortable bringing in lyrics and stuff for him to sing. So it's kind of, that process of bringing stuff to the table and then kind of flipping it on its head, and then finding the magic within.
Right.
As a songwriter, Homer, I feel like you've been writing just as long as me. You wrote songs for Sharon, and
that's true. But like, I feel like as a songwriter, where my strengths have like really developed has been as a supporting member. I only wrote a couple of songs for Sharon where I wrote all the lyrics and stuff like that, whereas like you have like albums of songs with lyrics.
Yeah.
And Homer, I got to imagine it's a very, looking on the outside, a very different situation. You worked with a big band, and you worked with a singer like Sharon was, which is R&B, very kind of soulful and vintage soul, and now you're kind of moving in the opposite direction. You're basically a trio, and you're working with a singer-songwriter. So how has that affected the way you approach the way you make your own music?
Well, I think that was like the trio thing was really intentional, because like doing this, I've been doing this for like since I was like 16, and I've always been playing in these big bands, and no matter how much money you make, you got to split it all different ways. So I was like, I'm going to start a new project. Let's keep it, lean and mean, because because I know how hard it is. So, and then on top of that, I've always, no matter how much like I love classic soul, I always like love listening to singer-songwriter stuff, and it's always been a part of like my personality. So it just really is liberating for me to kind of get to like explore that genre a little more, and not just live within one kind of trope, as it were.
Very good. And did the two of you, we should mention that the third member is Joe Harrison, is that right?
Yeah.
So before we go on, tell us a little bit about him, since he's not here.
Paul, you start that one.
We've known Joe like since kind of the beginning of Homer and I working together. When I came out to make an album with Homer out in New York at the Diamond Mine, Joe had just started as an intern. Mm-hmm. And Homer and I were trying to play bass on this song, and we both weren't exactly nailing it. And then Joe, who we hadn't seen play anything, picked up the bass, and it was amazing. And he ended up playing bass on the whole record and adding some other parts. And then when I came out again, he had kind of become a staple in the studio. It seemed like Homer, like he was playing on stuff with Tommy and with you guys. And then he joined the band. He's multi-talented. Now he lives in California though, so don't see him as much, but we go out there to write with them, or we try and schedule stuff. But as you saw from me trying to schedule a call with you, that ain't always the easiest.
I did notice that, and today I almost blew it. I came this close to screwing it up, so I can understand. I had to race back home here. Which kind of also the stuff that's going on. That you have the coronavirus. We have it. Well, we kind of got rid of it, but who knows? And all the other and all the other stuff that's going on in the States. How is that affecting what you're going to be able to do once this record is out on Friday?
So we're not going to be able to tour the record, and we kind of come to terms with that. And even promoting the record, we had a totally different approach, because a lot of like leading up to the record, we're going to do a bunch of shows, and we were planning on doing this canoe trip down the river.
Oh man!
Where we played shows like after a long day of canoeing. We put like some drums and guitars on the canoe and just go. But we did these like Instagram kind of videos and we started developing a plan for that, which was a really fun way to reinterpret the material for like Instagram and for like little video content. And I think me and Paul are both, what we love the most is really being in the studio and writing and creating. And so, we're excited. We've already started working on the next record, and we're excited to just work on that right now. So it gives us a chance to just make more music and just kind of let this album kind of live in the streaming world where, people can discover it. And
right.
I don't think we're expecting any big splash and huge album sales, but hopefully over time people will start to discover it. And by the time the next record comes out, some more people will be anticipating it and maybe get a little bit more listens and some bigger shows and stuff.
Right. So when you do play out, is it just the three of you, or do you augment it with other players, or how does it work?
Yeah,
you go, Paul.
Kind of different every time, but mostly we stick to a trio. But Homer has so many musician friends in New York that we're always inviting horn players and different bass players and
and we recently brought in Shannon from another band called the Shacks as like our local bass player, since Joe's in California. Right. And she sings too. And so now she's starting to help kind of collaborate on the record and stuff. And it's nice to have a East Coast bass player again.
Right. Yeah, because I noticed, your vocal is kind of in the falsetto area anyway. And there were times when I was wondering if there were female vocals in there or not, or, it was, so I could see how that could fit in.
Definitely helps to have a female because she can sing high.
Yeah.
We like those high vocals.
Yep.
And do you have any tracks, a couple of tracks on the album that you want to talk about specifically that mean something special to either one of you?
Paul, why don't you go first?
The one that stood out to me when I hadn't listened to the record in a couple months, and when on the day it came out, my wife put it on to listen to it, and the track that really stood out to me was this song "Red Is the Rose,"
right?
Which is based on an Irish folk song, and I just kind of don't know how it turned out the way it did. It's like really, really unique, and it sounds pretty different from the rest of the album to me. I guess if I think back, I know how it turned out, how it did, but I really like the mood of it and the layering of the production, and it's an adaptation. The lyrics are from an old Irish folk song that we really like, and so when we play it live, we usually play the Irish version first, which is in a major key, and then we bust into like the minor key.
Right.
Drum break. Homer has a great drum beat on that one, and Joe a great bass line. Right. Plus we have, what's the name of that horn that's on it? Megaphonium or something?
Mellophonium.
Mellophonium.
Yeah.
And Shannon also sings vocals at the end of that one. Harmony vocals. Okay. You get a little bit of everything. It's got a lot.
Very good. And Homer, what about you?
I think for me, at least, I've listened to the album so many times because in making a record, you kind of listen to it. And then, then I took a bit of a break. And when I went back to it, I was just really like into like the space and the vibe of the title track, Float Back to You. And partly because like when Paul wrote that song, it was pretty like finished song when he wrote it. We made some changes to the turnaround and stuff, but when I heard it, I immediately heard like a lowrider type drum beat on it, and it all made sense in my head. And I think we did one take of it the way I heard it, and it was perfect. And Paul did a take of vocals. It was all done very fast and very like instinctively. And then when I listen to it now, it doesn't really sound any bit of lowrider. It sounds like a Neil Young song on the beach, and that makes me really happy because, like, Neil Young is one of my all-time favorite artists, and he's not an artist that like I think you can have that much success when you just try and do a Neil Young type song,
Right.
because it's like he has his own sound, and it just kind of sounds like pastiche to just, okay, now we're going to do the Neil Young thing. But by using one of Paul's compositions and putting this like slow backbeat on it, it developed this vibe of its own that reminds me of that in like a really cool way.
Right. Yeah, interesting. And the other thing that's kind of interesting to me, because I'm an old guy, and most of the references that you've made are from music from the 70s, Lowrider, Neil Young. We were talking about Bob Dylan before, Bill Withers. Why is that? What is it about that era that struck you guys? Because you're, a few years younger than me, definitely.
Yeah. That is the eternal question. Why was that era of music so good? I mean, I think it might have something to do with technology, and at the time, like, I mean, this could be too heavy of an answer to go into, but it's basically like this convergence of all these American styles and like amazing technology coming together to create what I think is like some of the best sounding and best kind of performed music that has ever been put down on recording tape.
Yeah.
All these styles developed after that kind of like never compared to that. Like even like if just talking from a drumming standpoint, like the drumming in the 60s is so specific, and as the craft developed, it became so much more like varied, and it has a different vibe altogether. And I think that the drummers from back in the day, you can't capture that anymore.
Right.
And it's like it's like, I'm sure there's great drummers through all eras, but for me, that sound and that style, I don't know why, but that's I'm just drawn to it.
Right. And Paul, you're even younger than Homer. So how did you get turned on to this stuff?
The 60s music?
The 60s and 70s, yeah. I mean, did you seek it out on purpose, or was it kind of everywhere and you just kind of let it seep in?
I guess I always like listening to Cool 108, which was the oldies station.
Yeah, right.
And now that I'm 31, they're playing 80s music because
Right.
But when I was in high school, I would always in my house we were only allowed to really listen to either classical music or Irish folk music. So I would just listen to Cool 108 up in my room, or if I was working at the Dairy Queen. But I was more so into in like the music that I really liked in middle school and high school was like Lead Belly.
Right? Really?
And like Delta and Robert Johnson and like Woody Guthrie. And then a really like crazy Radiohead phase for some reason. Yeah, the 60s music I think has always appealed to me because of the playing. The musicianship and the songcraft. I don't know if we've ever been that good since.
Right. But still, I mean, let's face it, a teenager listening to Lead Belly and Radiohead isn't normal, is it? Or is it? I don't know.
I mean, I listen to a lot of Lead Belly too, and some Radiohead. So maybe, growing up in America, that was more normal than you think.
Yeah. I hope so. And do you guys have any opinions about what's going on in the States as far as, the whole Black Lives Matter thing and the unrest that's going on leading up to the election?
Yeah.
I'll let Paul take that.
All right.
Yeah, I really agree with the Black Lives Matter movement, and definitely like fully support them. I've done a lot of research, and I've been attending quite a few of these marches. I'm from Minneapolis.
Right. Yeah. That's.
My wife grew up in the neighborhood where George Floyd was killed, and she grew up going to that grocery store.
Mm.
So the day that video played, I couldn't watch the video, but what I could watch was the Minnesota governor and the Minneapolis mayor's response, and that just made me very angry with how lukewarm their response is. And yeah, it's just very evident that there needs to be large systemic change in this country.
Yeah. Well, hopefully that's going to happen.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, at least we have new music happening, which is something. And yeah, I've been enjoying listening to the album. I hope it does as well as it can under the circumstances. And it sounds like the second one will be hot on its heels. So we have that to look forward to. Hopefully you guys can come down and visit us down in New Zealand sometime soon.
We would love that.
I would love to.